Okay, Jordu, what's up, dude?
All right. Now, the paints that I am going to be using, these are Pelikan brand watercolors. These are opaque watercolors, okay? And what I do is I use these in layers and I thin them with a little bit of water and a little bit of alcohol. So I've got isopropyl alcohol and I've got some regular water, okay? Crystal Geyser works the best, not true. Okay, now, I'm going to take some isopropyl alcohol and I'm going to very carefully start tinting, staining the Sculpey more or less. Okay, very nice, faint traces of color. Now, this should help to really bring our sculpture to life.
What are some common mistakes for beginning painters?
Well, one of the common mistakes for beginning painters is a tendency to make everything kind of flat. Now, it's a lot harder to make things flat when you're dealing with a translucent material. So it's a little bit moot here, but it's either things are flat or they are muddy. Now, muddy is a tendency for all the colors to run together. Flat is when there's not enough breakup in the color. So they're almost two opposite issues. You know, they're issues at opposite ends of the spectrum. One is not using enough colors to break it up, and muddy is what happens when a bunch of colors just sort of tend to run together and not look good. Now you'll notice that the brush I'm using isn't really that fine. You know, it's just kind of it's a fine brush, but it's not hyper fine. I don't find it necessary to paint miniature heads like this.
Do you usually paint on unhardened Sculpey?
I almost always do it this way because what's going to happen is when I actually bake it in the oven, these colors will bake into it. They'll become permanent because I'm actually tinting the Sculpey. You know, alcohol breaks down the surface slightly, and by having what essentially amounts to tinted alcohol, I am staining the surface of the Sculpey and making it permanent on there. So even if I ran it under water, the paint won't come off.
Who are some painters that you really admire in town or around the world?
Well, as far as realistic skin painting, Tom Flouts, I think, is one of the very best I've ever seen. Kazuhiro is extraordinary. As far as creature paint work, I've never seen any painter who even touches Aaron Sims. Aaron was, you know, he kind of is more of a digital person now, but his paint work, his creature paint work, I basically learned how to do this stuff right from Aaron. You know, he didn't actually teach me, I just observed while I was working at Rick Baker's, where Aaron was at the time, on Men in Black, and it was just tremendous. I mean, it was a tremendous opportunity, and he could make anything look like it had layers of depth. I mean, it was extraordinary. I always thought his stuff was fantastic. Now you can see this slowly coming to life. You know, we've only added one color, a brick red color. Now we're going to add more of a purple, okay, mixed with a little bit of brown.
We have a question. We have many questions, but we have a question from Andrea Tironi. I've seen many people starting the painting process by laying in very bright reds, blues, yellows, and greens in specific areas. Do you ever use this technique?
I don't do it bright. I like to creep up on it. I think it's very important to start subtly. Now, you know, that's my way of doing it, and there are a billion ways to do it. Obviously, I like my way of doing it the most, or else I would be doing it some other way, but that doesn't mean that my way is the best way. I think it's, or the right or wrong way, it's just the way I do it. I've had a few students that insisted that sponge painting was the best way to paint skin. I think that when you're using acrylic paints or watercolor paints, that tends to look a little phony because it leaves rather glaring, artifacting around the edges, and I don't think that looks good. I'm a big fan of the airbrush, but, even using a hand brush like this, it's very important for me to get this kind of soft look to the paint, which is one of the reasons why I like doing it before it's baked. I feel like it gives the most convincing effect. Painting it unbaked because I can kind of move the colors around a little more easily than when I'm doing it on a hard surface. For instance, it's very difficult, it seems, to get resin to look translucent and real if it's not cast translucent to begin with, and in general, I think it's just hard to get that kind of soft effect.
I'm sure this has been mentioned, but we have a question from Gregory Ferns. Is the color washed out in alcohol or water, and what kind of paint are you using?
I'm using watercolor paint. The brand is Pelican, and I'm using both water and alcohol. The alcohol is to help sort of stain the Sculpey, and the water, of course, is to actually make the watercolors move, actually work, because pure 99% alcohol is probably not going to do that. But you can really see life and depth coming through now in our character.